What do you do when the story should be over but isn't? What's up, everybody? I'm Tyson Putoff, and this is scene 28 of the Jesus X30 challenge. Now, this is exciting. This is actually the final scene, scene 28, in the books that we're following along my 3-volume book project on Jesus called Jesus, the Strategic Life and Mission of the Messiah and His Movement. The book ends at scene 28. We're going to continue 2 more scenes after this in the Jesus X30 challenge, and we'll deal with some things that aren't actually in the book. But if you don't have your books, go ahead and grab your copies. They're all 3 are in print, in ebook, and in print. You can find them at bookstores, at booksellers online. You can rent it for free through public library apps like Hoopla or Overdrive. Check it out. You're going to be able to get a lot more depth and exegesis of the biblical texts and insights on the history and the social setting of Jesus's world, more than what we can go into in these episodes. So check them out. But again, we're in scene 28, the final scene of the book. This is a fun scene. So this is post-crucifixion, post-resurrection, where we're following Jesus through his post-resurrection appearances and eventually his ascension from earth back to heaven. And these are the closing movements of his earthly campaign. Interestingly, this is not a victory parade of power and spectacle. This is a series of deeply personal encounters in which Jesus restores and teaches and commissions his followers. He doesn't go around shouting and with blazing trumpets and crowds around him announcing that he's back for good to sit on his throne, like a Roman emperor, like a president, like someone in ancient world or in our own world might do. Instead, he goes and he makes personal connections with people who have failed in the previous 2 years in which he's been establishing his movement and his relationships with them. These are quiet moments where resurrection becomes more than just this event. It becomes relational. It becomes missional. If we were writing the story ourselves, we might expect the risen Jesus to appear before Pilate or the high priests to prove his authority to those who condemned him. Sort of a I told you so, a revenge tour. That's not what happens. Jesus begins with individuals who have fallen, who have fallen away from him as he predicted would happen before his crucifixion, who have denied him, who have rejected him publicly. His focus is on those whom he knows are hurting, and in restoring them and redeeming them, he knows that they're going to be the most powerful forces, more powerful than guns, more powerful than weapons, more powerful than policy, more powerful than the presidency, more powerful than the thrones. These people, restored people, are going to be the most powerful forces in the process of re-transforming the world and bringing the new creation about on earth. The first person he appears to is Mary Magdalene, John 20. She's not a leader. She's not a public figure. You know, we have a lot of traditions and ideas about Mary Magdalene in our own day. And she was popular in the centuries that followed in the early Christian writings. But at this point, she's known in the close circles around Jesus, but she's not known for much except that she's just faithful to Jesus. You remember in the previous episode, she mistook Jesus for the gardener. She didn't recognize him until he called her by name, Mary, and that set her on a path. So we know he encountered Mary Magdalene. We know he encountered the 2 men walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus. We know he appeared to the disciples in the room locked behind closed doors. We know he appeared to Thomas. We know he appeared to all of these people. John 21 shifts the story north to the Galilee, where Jesus grew up, where Jesus's movement was born. And by this time, some of the disciples have returned to fishing. They've kind of abandoned their rabbinic training at this point. I don't know Why? They're maybe trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy after all of the crucifixion and the resurrection, and after a night of catching nothing, they're out on the sea, and they're just trying to, figure out how to go about life on this side of the whole last 2 years following Jesus around. And they hear a voice from the shore telling them to cast their nets on the other side. So they do. And lo and behold, the nets overflow. And John recognizes the voice and he says, "It's the Lord, it's Jesus." Of course, Peter, he jumps into the water, he rushes to Jesus, and on the shore, Jesus is cooking breakfast over a charcoal fire. And Jesus serves the meal. And it's a really fascinating picture once again of Jesus serving those around him rather than having them serve him. It's a picture of humble presence rather than this glorious divine display. And that charcoal fire recalls another fire, the one where Peter denied Jesus 3 times, remember, on the night of Jesus's arrest. Now they're sitting by another fire on the beach, and Jesus gives him 3 opportunities to respond differently, basically to redeem himself from the 3 opportunities that were given him in the courtyard that night where he denied Jesus. And Jesus asks him, "Hey, Peter, do you love me?" 3 times. And each time Peter replies, "Yes." And at the end of this, Jesus doesn't say, "I told you so, you should have stuck with me." He doesn't condemn him, he doesn't shame him, doesn't reprimand him, he restores him. At the end of these questions and answers, "Do you love me?" "Yes." Jesus says, "Peter, feed my sheep." Peter's failure becomes his commissioning. In this economy of grace, even weakness and failure becomes leadership material. We next find Jesus on a mountain in the Galilee. It's the same region where the movement began, remember? And Jesus gathers all of his followers together, Matthew 28. And this is the moment we call the Great Commission. And his words echo like enthronement language in the ancient world. He starts to talk about how all authority in heaven and all authority on earth has been given to me. Again, he's echoing texts in the Hebrew Bible in the Old Testament like Daniel 7, which would have been really well known among Jesus's followers at the time. In this section of Daniel 7, is where the Son of Man receives dominion from the Ancient of Days. So Jesus, who was at one point a condemned criminal, a crucified revolutionary, now declares universal authority over, even including the Roman authorities who put him to death just a short time before. But instead of commanding armies, instead of calling down angels to go and defeat all of those who oppose him, to go and put the world to the sword and give them a choice, either convert or die, Jesus doesn't do any of that. But instead of going and enforcing himself on others, he sends out disciples. And he says, "Go and make more disciples of all the nations, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you." The mission he's established expands beyond Israel, beyond God's people, beyond this small geographic region, to every people group, to every nation, to every person. And it's not through conquest or fear, but it's through the transformation of lives and the transformation of societies. A short time later, we're back in Jerusalem. Jesus leads his followers to the Mount of Olives. And this is a really beautiful place. Again, they've been there before, but this time he blesses them. Luke 24, Acts 1 records this too. He blesses them and then he ascends to heaven. And this is his kind of farewell. To ancient audiences, this isn't about Jesus's departure. This is about Jesus's enthronement. It's not an ascension in the sense that he's going up and going away. It's an ascension like he's ascending to the throne. This is about Jesus retaking the throne that is rightfully his. And the cloud imagery, again, that we get recalls the presence of God on Sinai and in the temple. And Jesus is not vanishing. He's being installed at the right hand of God to begin his reign in this post-resurrection world. And so as the disciples watch, two of them ask, why are you still standing there looking into the sky? And it's interesting because I think this is kind of a subtle reminder that the task of the disciples that day and our task today isn't just to stare upward, staring at the sky, watching Jesus ascend or waiting for him to return, right? The mission that Jesus had begun in 26 and 27 and 28 and 29 AD extends now to his disciples, standing there looking up and watching him ascend. The work is now to be done. And I think the same is true of us. Instead of standing and watching Jesus go up or waiting for him to come down and staring at the sky, Jesus has commissioned you and me to carry out the work of transforming people and transforming systems and transforming society on his behalf and in the way that he commanded us to do, by loving our neighbor, by loving our enemy, by serving them and sacrificing for them. And the catch here is not that he's gone up and now he's looking down on us and expecting us to do this like a coach watching his team from the sideline. It's as if he's gone up and he's distributed his presence through the Spirit, through the power of the Spirit in us and in the world, enabling us to do this work. Every scene in this post-resurrection journey carries the same pattern. Jesus meets people where they are. Mary was grieving. The travelers were doubting. The disciples were afraid. Peter was a enormous failure, and he gives them what they need. He gives them recognition. He gives them understanding. He gives them peace, and he restores them. And the resurrection is never about power and dominance and spectacle. It's always about transformation. It's always about redemption and restoration. We've talked about this before, but I think the real question isn't whether we're just going to sit here and believe. We're going to stare up at the sky and think about and reminisce about and enjoy the benefits of what Jesus did on the cross and in the resurrection. I think the question now is whether or not you or I are going to actually live out the resurrection. The resurrection isn't a single moment in history. It's a pattern of renewal that continues to shape the world every time our faith overcomes our fears. Our love displaces our hate. Our forgiveness replaces shame. That's the power of the resurrection. And that's the calling for you and me, even now, even still in our own world. Lekumad, go and learn. Come back for scene 29 of the JesusX30 challenge.